The red dust swirled around Max Parsons' boots as he scanned the crowd, his hand hovering near the pulse rifle strapped to his back. Franco Knoll's Central Plaza heaved with colonists, their faces painted red and gold, the colors of the Martian flag. 3 years as a colonial marine, and Max still hadn't gotten used to the raw energy of these rallies. The terraformed air carried their voices upward into the salmon-colored sky, where Phobos would have been visible once before they'd nuked it into a radioactive halo that now encircled Mars like a warning. "Martian independence or death!" a man with wild eyes shouted, his fist punching the air. The crowd roared in response, and Max felt the familiar chill crawl up his spine. 23 years of war had turned that phrase from revolutionary slogan to sacred mantra. "Looking twitchy there, Parson," said Sergeant Katrina Shipp as she stepped beside him on the security perimeter. Her armor bore the marks of a dozen engagements, most famously the Battle of Olympus Mons, where she'd lost an arm and gained a reputation. "Just doing my job, Sarge," Max replied, eyes never leaving the crowd. "Something doesn't feel right today." Shipp snorted. "Your instincts talking again? Last time they talked, we found those Earth sympathizers with enough explosives to level half this district." Max said nothing. Across the plaza, Governor Coulson was taking the podium, his voice amplified across Franco Knoll. The city's architecture, a blend of early colony utilitarian domes and modern Martian spires, created an amphitheater effect. 3 million residents, and it seemed like half of them were here today. 23 years, Coulson bellowed. 23 years since Earth tried to strip away our autonomy. 23 years since they demanded we surrender the resources we mined with our blood and sweat. 23 years of fighting for the freedom that is our birthright. Max comm unit crackled. "Sierra team, we've got anomalous readings in high orbit, massive heat signatures breaking atmo. This is not a drill." Max's blood turned to ice. "Sarge." "I heard." Shipp was already moving, signaling to the other Marines. "Initiate protocol, Osiris, now." The crowd's fervor transformed to confusion as emergency sirens began to wail across Franco Knoll. Max training took over as he rushed to the eastern quadrant of the plaza. "Citizens of Franco Knoll," his voice boomed through his helmet's external speakers, "proceed immediately to the nearest bunker. This is a Class 1 emergency. Move quickly and calmly." The sky flickered. "Oh, God," whispered someone in the crowd. "Look up." Max followed their gaze and felt his stomach drop. Breaking through the pink Martian atmosphere were dozens, no, hundreds, of fiery streaks. Earth's orbital platforms were unleashing hell. The first impact hit the Tharsis Ridge 50 kilometers away, but the shockwaves still knocked people off their feet. The sky turned from salmon to blood red as dust and debris clouded the air. "Move!" Max shouted, grabbing a young woman frozen in terror. "Everyone to the bunkers, now!" Chaos erupted. The carefully orchestrated evacuation plans dissolved into panic as another impact hit closer, shattering the glass dome of the agricultural district. 3.2 billion people on Mars, and Earth was trying to exterminate them all. Max's comm crackled again. "All units, planetary defense grid is engaged but overwhelmed. Estimate 80% of orbital bombardment getting through. This is unprecedented." Shipp appeared at his side, her face grim. "Parson, get these civilians to Bunker 7. The old mining tunnels beneath Aldrin Street. What about you, Sarge?" "Governor's security detail is compromised. I'm taking command and getting him to the command center." She gripped his shoulder. "This isn't like previous attacks. This is something else. Something worse." The ground trembled beneath them as another impact hit nearby. The magnificent spire of the Colonial Administration Building, Franco Knoll's pride, cracked and began to crumble. "Go!" Shipp shoved him. "That's an order, Marine." Max nodded, then turned to the terrified civilians. "Follow me if you want to live. Bunker 7." He led them through streets already filling with dust and debris. The bombardment intensified. Surgical strikes targeting power stations, water reclamation facilities, and transportation hubs. Earth wasn't just attacking, they were trying to destroy Mars's ability to sustain life. A young boy stumbled, and Max swept him up without breaking stride. The child couldn't be more than 6, born into war, knowing nothing else. "My mom!" the boy cried. "I can't find my mom." "We'll find her at the bunker," Max promised, hoping it wasn't a lie. "What's your name?" "Dax." "Well, Dax, I'm Colonial Marine Max Parson, and I'm going to get you somewhere safe." They reached Aldrin Street as the ground shook violently. The entrance to the mining tunnels, converted years ago into one of Franco Knoll's oldest bunkers, was visible ahead, its massive steel doors already open, with Marines directing civilians inside. Max handed Dax to a medic. "Find his mother if you can. Name's Dax." The medic nodded grimly. Max turned to head back to the surface, but his comm unit erupted with static and a broken message. "Orbital defense stations destroyed. Massive troop carriers detected. They're landing. I repeat, Earth is putting boots on the ground." The message cut off. Max froze. In 23 years of war, Earth had never attempted a ground invasion of Mars. The logistics were too complex, the casualties too high to justify. Until now. A corporal grabbed his arm. "Sir!" "Colonel Darius is ordering all Marines to defensive positions. They are estimating ground forces will reach Franco Knoll within the hour." Max looked back at the bunker entrance, at the civilians huddling inside, at young Dax's tear-streaked face. "How many Marines are we mustering?" "Maybe 8,000 in Franco Knoll, sir, against what looks like 100,000 Earth troops. Impossible odds. Suicide. But if they didn't fight, Earth would slaughter every colonist." Max checked his pulse rifle and activated his armor's combat systems. The Gadsden flag, symbol of colonial independence across the solar system, was emblazoned on his shoulder plate, its 13 stars representing the first 13 colonial settlements in the system. "Get these people sealed in," he ordered, "then show me where I'm needed." As he headed back to the surface, Max thought of his parents, early colonists, who'd believed in Mars's future, who'd died believing Mars would one day be truly free. The red dust swirled around his boots as he emerged into the devastated streets of Franco Knoll. The sky burned with dropships breaching the atmosphere. In his earpiece, he heard the remnants of the colonial fleet engaging Earth's invasion force in orbit. Heard the death cries of ships and men. Heard the beginning of the end. Or maybe, Max thought as he checked his weapon and moved toward the city's perimeter, just the end of the beginning. Behind him, the massive bunker doors began to close, sealing away Mars's future. Ahead, Earth's troops were coming to claim the red planet. Max Parson took a deep breath of terraformed Martian air and prepared to make them pay for every inch of dust. "Parson, get your ass over here!" Max turned to see Lieutenant Montana waving frantically from an overturned transport. He sprinted across the debris-littered street, pulse rifle clutched tight against his chest. A dozen Marines had established a hasty defensive position, deploying portable shields and mounting heavy repeaters on the rubble. "Sit rep?" Max asked, sliding into cover beside Montana. The lieutenant's face was streaked with dust and blood. "Earth's landing 3 clicks east at the old terraforming station. First wave's already touching down. Dropships, armor, and some new infantry we haven't seen before." Max's helmet display lit up with tactical overlays. The colonial defense net was fragmented but still functioning. Red dots representing Earth forces swarmed across the eastern quadrant. "What about our orbital defenses?" Montana's laugh was hollow. "What orbital defenses?" "They're gone, Parson. Completely overwhelmed. The bastards must have been building this invasion force for years, hiding it behind Jupiter or something." He checked his own rifle. "Colonel Darius has ordered all available units to form a defensive ring around the bunker entrances. We hold as long as we can, give the civilians time to get deep underground." "And then what?" Montana didn't answer. He didn't have to. "Incoming!" someone shouted. The air screamed as Earth dropships roared overhead, their engines burning blue-hot against the dust-choked sky. One banked sharply, hovering over a collapsed apartment complex 2 blocks away. Its side doors slid open, disgorging troops in sleek white combat armor. "What the hell are those?" a young Marine whispered. Max recognized them immediately. ESEF, Earth Special Expeditionary Force. The elite troops that had devastated the colonies on Ganymede years earlier. The boogeyman that colonial parents used to frighten unruly children. The ESEF troops moved with unnatural precision, their armor gleaming even through the dust storm. One pointed in their direction, and the entire squad pivoted simultaneously. "Open fire!" Montana ordered. The colonial Marines unleashed hell. Pulse rifles spat blue energy bolts, heavy repeaters churned out tungsten slugs, and shoulder-mount missile launchers screamed toward the SESF troops. It should have annihilated them. It barely slowed them down. The white-armored soldiers charged through the barrage, their own weapons returning precise, devastating fire. 3 Marines went down in the first volley. "They've got kinetic shields," Max shouted. Adjusting his rifle's frequency, switched to modulating bursts standard pulses can't penetrate. A few Marines managed to recalibrate their weapons. One ECF soldier stumbled as a modulated burst caught him in the chest, then immediately rolled back to his feet. "What are these things?" Montana gasped as a round grazed his shoulder plate. Max had no answer. The SES troops closed the distance with inhuman speed. The first reached their barricade, vaulting over it with graceful ease. Max caught a glimpse of the soldier's face through the helmet visor. Cold, focused, with strange implants visible around the eyes and jawline. Max fired point-blank into the soldier's chest, and the modulated burst finally penetrated the shield, sending the ESEF troopers sprawling backward. But there were more right behind him. "Fall back," Montana ordered. "Secondary position at Aldrin Plaza." The Marines retreated in practiced formation, laying down covering fire. Earth dropships continued to flood the sky, disgorging more troops and now heavy equipment. Hover tanks and artillery platforms that settled onto the Martian dust with predatory grace. Max's comm crackled with desperate transmissions from across Franco Knoll. "They're through the western perimeter. Need immediate reinforcement at the medical center." "Oh God, those aren't just soldiers. They're augmented somehow." A sudden explosion rocked the ground. Max looked up to see the massive communications array that had stood atop Mount Richards for a century topple and crash down the mountainside in a cascade of metal and stone. "They're isolating us," Montana muttered, "cutting us off from the other colonies." They reached Aldrin Plaza, or what was left of it. The beautiful monument to the second human who'd walked on Mars centuries ago was now a crater. Colonial Marines had fortified the surrounding buildings, turning boutiques and cafes into bunkers. Colonel Darius had established a command post in the transit station. "Lieutenant Montana," Darius acknowledged as they rushed inside. A holographic display of Franco Knoll floated before her, more red dots appearing with each passing minute. "Report." "ESEF troops at the eastern perimeter, ma'am. They've got some kind of enhanced armor and augmentations we haven't seen before. Standard pulse weapons barely slow them down." Darius nodded grimly. "We're seeing the same everywhere. Whatever Earth's been developing the past decade, they've thrown it all at us today." She manipulated the hologram, zooming out to show all of Mars. Red markers blinked across the planet's surface. "It's not just Franco Knoll. They're hitting New Shanghai, Olympus City, Mariner Valley, everywhere." Max stared at the display in horror. This wasn't a raid or a strategic strike. This was extinction. "What's the plan, Colonel?" he asked. Darius looked at him, and for a moment her mask slipped. Max saw raw fear before the commander's composure returned. "We've lost, Marine." Her voice was steady. "Earth isn't here to subjugate Mars anymore. They're here to end us." The command center fell silent. "With respect, ma'am," Max said, "as long as there's one colonial with a pulse rifle, we haven't lost." A ghost of a smile touched Darius's lips. "Well said, Parson." She straightened her back. "We have 300,000 civilians in bunkers beneath this city. Our job now is to buy them time. Keep Earth busy up here while our people go deeper." "Deeper where, ma'am?" Montana asked. Darius's finger traced across the holographic display to the vast Valles Marineris, the enormous canyon system that stretched across Mars's equator. "Operation Lazarus," she said quietly. 20 years in the making, a contingency we hoped we'd never need." Max recognized the name from whispered rumors. "It's real?" "As real as the air we're breathing," Darius confirmed. "Deep beneath Valles Marineris, we've built a sanctuary. Self-sustaining, hidden from orbital scans. It can house millions. The bunkers here connect to transit tunnels leading there. So we hold the surface," Montana said, understanding dawning. "For as long as we can," Darius agreed. "Days, maybe weeks if we're lucky. Long enough for the civilians to reach Lazarus." "And then?" Darius's eyes hardened. "And then we make Earth regret ever setting foot on our planet." An explosion rocked the command center. Dust rained from the ceiling. "They've found us," someone reported. "SF troops approaching from all sides." Darius closed the holographic display. "You have your orders. Every minute we survive is another 100 civilians who make it to safety." She drew her sidearm. "For Mars." "For Mars," the Marines echoed. As they moved to their positions, Max caught Montana's arm. "Sir, there's a boy in Bunker 7. Dax, if you make it out of here." "I'll find him," Montana promised. "But you'll tell him yourself when this is over." Max nodded, knowing the lie for what it was. Outside, the sky had darkened to a blood-red twilight as dust and smoke choked the atmosphere. The terraformed paradise of Mars was dying. But its people would not. Max took position behind a fallen pillar, training his rifle on the approach to the transit station. Behind him, hundreds of Marines prepared for their last stand. None expected to see another sunrise. The first ESEF troops appeared at the edge of the plaza, their white armor ghostly in the dim light. Hundreds of them, moving in perfect formation. Behind them rolled Earth's hover tanks, their cannons already targeting the colonial position. "Steady," Max whispered to himself. His finger tightened on the trigger. "For Mars." The world exploded into chaos. Colonial Marines opened fire simultaneously, a disciplined volley that momentarily lit the darkening Martian sky with blue-white energy. The ESEF troops scattered with inhuman precision, some rolling behind cover while others activated portable shield generators that shimmered like heat mirages above the red dust. "Concentrate fire!" Lieutenant Montana shouted over the din. "Target their command units!" Max identified an ESEF soldier with distinctive shoulder markings and squeezed off 3 rapid bursts. The first 2 were absorbed by the kinetic shield, but the third connected, spinning the Earth soldier to the ground. No celebration. Max was already shifting his aim to the next target. Earth's hover tanks powered forward through the barrage. Energy weapons charging with an ominous whine. Max had seen what those cannons could do during the Battle of Deimos Station 3 years ago. Nothing survived. "Anti-armor, now!" Colonel Darius ordered from her position behind an overturned transport. 3 Marines hefted massive launchers to their shoulders. They fired in perfect unison, sending guided projectiles screaming toward the tanks. 2 found their marks, the explosions briefly turning night to day. The tanks crumpled like toys, but the third missile was intercepted by some invisible defense system, detonating harmlessly meters from its target. The remaining tank fired. The colonial position to Max's right simply vanished. Marines and fortifications alike reduced to vapor and scattered atoms. The concussion knocked Max sprawling, his helmet HUD flickering with damage reports and warning indicators. His ears rang as he dragged himself back to cover. Blood trickled from his nose. Through dust cloud vision, he saw ESEF troops advancing through the gap, moving with that unnatural coordination that had already claimed so many colonial lives. "They're flanking us," Max shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of battle. He switched his rifle to fully automatic and laid down suppressing fire, buying precious seconds for the survivors to reposition. A shadow loomed above him. Max looked up to see an ESEF soldier standing over him, energy pistol aimed at his head. Time slowed. Max could see the soldier's eyes through the visor. Cold, but undeniably human. There was a moment of connection, soldier to soldier, before the ESEF trooper's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot never came. The Earth soldier jerked backward, chest plate shattering as a high-caliber round punched through both shield and armor. Max rolled away as the body collapsed beside him. "You're welcome, pretty boy," a familiar voice called. Sergeant Ship crouched 20 meters away, her sniper rifle already targeting another ESEF soldier. Her prosthetic arm gleamed in the muzzle flashes, its servos whirring as she worked the bolt with inhuman speed. "Thought you were with the governor," Max shouted as he scrambled to her position. Ship's face was grim as she fired again. Another Earth soldier fell. Governor's dead. Command bunker took a direct hit. She ejected a spent thermal clip. "I'm all that's left of his security detail." Max's blood ran cold. "Central Command? Colonel Adams?" "Gone." Ship slammed a fresh clip into her rifle. "High Command's been decapitated. We're on our own now." Across the ruined plaza, Lieutenant Montana was rallying the remaining Marines, pulling them back toward the transit station in a fighting retreat. Colonel Darius stood in the entrance, directing the defense with the calm efficiency that had made her a legend among the colonial forces. "What about Operation Lazarus?" Max asked, firing a burst at advancing ESEF troops. "Still viable. Darius is the ranking officer on the planet now. She's initiated full evacuation protocols." Ship sighed down her scope. "Problem is, Earth seems to know exactly where our bunker entrances are. They're targeting them specifically." Max thought of Bunker 7, of Dax and the thousands of civilians sheltering there. How? That information was compartmentalized. Ship's laugh was bitter. "We've got a rat. Has to be." An explosion rocked the transit station. Darius disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. Montana shouted something unintelligible, pointing at the sky. Max looked up to see a fresh wave of Earth dropships descending through the atmospheric haze. Dozens of them, hundreds. "We can't hold," he whispered. Ship grabbed his armor with her mechanical hand, fingers denting the reinforced plate. "Listen to me, Parson. The transit tunnels to Valles Marineris run beneath this station. Darius was coordinating the civilian movement through checkpoint Odyssey 3, 5 levels down. Someone needs to keep that route secure." Max stared at her. "What about you?" Ship released him and turned back to her rifle. "Someone needs to buy time up here." She smiled. The first genuine smile Max had seen from her in years. "Besides, I've got a score to settle with these ESEF bastards. They took my arm at Olympus Mons. I owe them." Before Max could respond, their position was bracketed by artillery fire. Both Marines were thrown to the ground as pulverized concrete and twisted metal rained down around them. When Max's vision cleared, he saw Ship pinned beneath a fallen support beam, blood pooling beneath her. He scrambled to her side. "Don't!" she gasped, stopping his attempt to lift the beam. "Spinal's severed. I can't feel anything below my chest." She pressed her sidearm into Max's hand. "Get to the transit tunnels. Get those people to Valles Marineris." "Sarge." "That's an order, Marine." Her eyes burned with intensity. "Mars survives in its people, not its dust. Remember that." Max swallowed hard, then nodded. He took her tags and squeezed her shoulder one last time. "It's been an honor, Sergeant Ship." "Likewise, pretty boy." She gripped his wrist with surprising strength. "Oh, and Parson? Make sure those Earth bastards pay for every inch of our planet." Max left her with her rifle and a bandolier of thermal clips. He didn't look back as he sprinted toward the transit station, dodging energy blasts and artillery strikes. The colonial line was collapsing everywhere, Marines falling back in small groups or making final stands where they stood. The transit station's grand entrance had been reduced to rubble. Max clambered over broken stone and twisted metal, following the colonial defense markers painted hastily on the walls. Inside the once bustling concourse was a makeshift field hospital. Wounded Marines and civilians lay in rows, medics moving among them with dwindling supplies. "Where's Colonel Darius?" Max asked a harried medic. The woman pointed to a collapsed section of ceiling. "Under there. She ordered the evacuation of all wounded to level 3 before the roof came down. Lieutenant Montana's in command now. He's at the central elevator shaft." Max picked his way through the wounded to the massive elevator shaft that ran through the heart of the station. The elevators themselves were disabled, but combat engineers had rigged rappelling systems down the shafts. Montana stood, directing the flow of wounded and civilians downward. "Montana!" Max called. The lieutenant turned. His left arm hung useless at his side, the armor scorched and melted. "Parson, glad you made it." He gestured at the shaft. "We're moving everyone to Checkpoint Odyssey 3. From there they'll take the maglev tunnels to Valles Marineris. Chip said Earth knows about our bunker entrances." Montana nodded grimly. "They hit 5 of them simultaneously across the city. Thousands dead before they even reached the lower levels." He lowered his voice. "We've got a traitor in the ranks, but that's a problem for another day. Right now, we need to hold this position until the last civilians get through. How many Marines do we have left?" "In the station? Maybe 40 combat efforts." Montana's laugh was hollow, against what looks like a full ESEF brigade outside. An explosion echoed from the concourse, followed by the distinctive sound of Earth pulse rifles. ESEF troops had breached the station. "They're inside!" someone shouted. Montana's face hardened. "Parson, take 5 Marines and get to level 3. Hold the checkpoint. I'll delay them here." "Sir?" "Not up for debate, Marine. This is about the survival of our species now." Montana checked his weapon. "I've got civilians still coming in from bunkers 2 and 4. We need to get them to the transit tunnels." Max hesitated, then clasped the lieutenant's forearm in the traditional Martian salute. "See you in Valles Marineris, sir." Montana's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Count on it." Max gathered 5 Marines, all that could be spared, and led them to the emergency stairwell. As they descended into the depths of Franco Knoll, the sounds of battle above grew distant, then faded entirely. 3 levels down, the stairwell opened into a massive underground chamber carved from the Martian bedrock. Checkpoint Odyssey 3 had once been a maglev maintenance depot. Now it was a churning sea of humanity. Thousands of civilians from across Franco Knoll being processed through security checkpoints and directed to the waiting maglev trains that would carry them to Valles Marineris. A harried colonial officer intercepted them. "Marines, thank God. We're undermanned and overwhelmed here." "Status report?" Max demanded. "We've got trains departing every 15 minutes, each carrying 2,000 civilians. The line to Valles Marineris is still secure, but we're getting reports of Earth forces hitting other transit hubs across the planet." Max surveyed the massive chamber. Families huddled together, children crying, the elderly being carried on makeshift stretchers, the future of Mars being evacuated from their homes. "How many more to process?" The officer consulted a datapad. "From Frank Knoll alone?" "At least 70,000 still in the pipeline, plus wounded coming down from the surface." A distant rumble shook dust from the ceiling. The battle was getting closer. "Defensive positions," Max ordered his Marines. "Nothing gets through to these civilians." As his team moved to secure the checkpoint, Max heard a familiar voice. "Marine Parson?" He turned to see a medic approaching, a small figure clutching her hand. Max's breath caught in his throat. "Dax!" The boy's eyes widened in recognition. He broke away from the medic and ran to Max, wrapping his arms around the Marine's armored legs. "You remembered me," Dax said, his voice muffled against Max's dust-covered armor. Max knelt down to the boy's level. "Of course I did." "Did you find your mom?" Dax's face fell. He shook his head. "She was in the agricultural district when the first bombs hit," the medic explained quietly. Max placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'm sorry, Dax." He searched for words of comfort and found none. Instead, he asked, "Are you being taken care of here?" The boy nodded. "I'm going on the train with Ms. Quick and her family." He pointed to a woman organizing a group of children nearby. "Good, that's good." Max tried to sound confident. "You're going somewhere safe, somewhere Earth can't find you." Dax looked up at him with eyes too old for his 6 years. "Are you coming too?" Before Max could answer, alarms blared throughout the checkpoint. The colonial officer who had greeted them returned, his face ashen. "SF troops have breached Level 2. They'll be here in minutes." The crowd's murmur turned to panicked cries. Civilian security personnel struggled to maintain order. "Get these people on the trains," Max ordered. "Everyone goes now, no processing, no verification, just get them out of here." "But protocol?" "To hell with protocol. Move." As the evacuation accelerated, Max turned back to Dax. The boy was watching him with solemn understanding beyond his years. "You're not coming, are you?" he asked. Max shook his head. "Someone has to make sure you get away safely." Dax reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a carved stone figure of Phobos, the way it had looked before the nukes, a good luck charm that many Martian children carried. "Take this," he said, pressing it into Max's gloved hand, "so you can find us when it's over." Max swallowed the lump in his throat and closed his fingers around the stone. "I'll do my best." Ms. Quick appeared, gently taking Dax's hand. "We need to board now," she said to Max, her eyes conveying silent gratitude. Max nodded. "Take care of him." As they hurried toward the waiting train, Dax looked back once, raising his small hand in farewell. Max returned the gesture, then turned to face the stairwell entrance, where the first sounds of approaching ESEF troops could be heard. He checked his rifle's charge, half depleted, and positioned himself behind a concrete barrier. His 5 Marines spread out across the checkpoint, establishing interlocking fields of fire. Above them, the sounds of battle grew louder. Montana and the others were buying time with their lives. Max thought of Ship pinned beneath the beam, of Montana making his stand in the concourse, of Darius buried beneath the collapsed ceiling, of all the colonial Marines who had fought and died this day. The first ESEF helmet appeared in the stairwell entrance. Max raised his rifle, the small stone figure of Phobos clutched in his other hand. "To Mars." Max fired 3 precise bursts. The first ESEF soldier crumpled, his shield overwhelmed by the concentrated fire. 2 more Earth soldiers stepped over their fallen comrade, returning fire with mechanical precision. Energy bolts chewed into Max's cover, superheating the concrete until it began to crack. "Suppressive fire, left flank," Max ordered. His Marines responded instantly, their weapons creating a lethal crossfire that momentarily forced the ESEF troops back into the stairwell. Behind him, the last civilians were boarding the maglev trains, the station filled with the sounds of frightened children and desperate instructions from colonial security. "Parson," the colonial officer who'd been managing the evacuation, slid into cover beside him. "Train 7 is the last one. Engineering says they're setting the charges to collapse the tunnels behind it." Max nodded without taking his eyes off the stairwell entrance. "Aliens have been harmed." "How many more civilians?" "Maybe 1,000. 5 minutes to load them." 5 minutes, an eternity in combat. "We'll give you those 5 minutes, Max promised. A new sound echoed from the stairwell, a high-pitched whine that made Max's blood run cold. He'd heard it once before, during the Battle of Acidalia Planitia. "Breach drones, get down!" Small spherical objects bounced into the checkpoint, their surfaces pulsing with blue light. Max and his Marines dove for cover as the drones detonated simultaneously, not with fire or shrapnel, but with a concussive force that liquefied concrete and turned the air itself into a weapon. Max's helmet protection kicked in, damping the worst effects, but 2 of his Marines weren't so lucky. They lay crumpled against the far wall, their armor crushed like paper. Through the dust and debris, SAF troops poured into the checkpoint, their weapons spitting death. Unlike regular Earth forces, these soldiers moved with unnatural cohesion, more like parts of a single organism than individual fighters. "Fall back to secondary positions," Max ordered his remaining Marines. "Protect the boarding platforms." They retreated in good order, laying down covering fire as they moved toward the maglev platforms where the last civilians were boarding. Max checked his rifle's charge. Critically low. He swapped in his final power cell, knowing it wouldn't be enough. A scream cut through the chaos. Max turned to see one of his Marines lifted by an ESEF soldier, the Earth Trooper's augmented armor giving him impossible strength. The Colonial Marine's spine snapped audibly before she was tossed aside like garbage. "Blake!" Max fired at the ESEF soldier, his shots causing the Earth Trooper to stagger but not fall. More were coming, advancing relentlessly through the Marines' defensive fire. "Last train is loaded!" the Colonial officer shouted from the platform. "Engineers are starting the countdown." Max made a split-second decision. "All Marines, fall back to the train. That's an order." His two remaining Marines backed toward the platform, still firing. Max moved to follow, then noticed a young woman frozen in terror behind an overturned cart, missed in the evacuation. "Go!" he shouted to his Marines. "Get on that train." Max sprinted to the woman, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the platform. An energy bolt seared past his helmet, close enough to leave a black scorch mark on the visor. Another struck his shoulder plate, melting through the armor and searing the flesh beneath. Max didn't slow. The pain was distant, irrelevant. All that mattered was getting this woman, this piece of Mars's future, onto that train. They reached the platform as the maglev's doors began to close. Max shoved the woman through the narrowing gap, then turned to face the advancing ESEF troops. His Marines fired from inside the train, providing what cover they could. "Parson, come on!" one of them shouted. Max knew he wouldn't make it. The ESEF troops were too close, their fire too accurate. If he tried to board, they'd riddle him with energy bolts and likely hit civilians inside. Instead, he reached for the grenades at his belt. 3 left. "Enough! Tell them Mars survives!" he shouted to his Marines as the train doors sealed. Max activated all 3 grenades simultaneously and charged toward the The Earth soldiers, recognizing the threat, concentrated their fire on him. Energy bolts punched through his armor, each impact a supernova of pain that Max pushed through by sheer will. 3 steps, 2, 1. Max crashed into the leading ESEP soldiers, grenades clutched to his chest. The last thing he saw was the human eyes behind those inhuman visors, widening in the universal expression of fear. The explosion tore through the checkpoint, collapsing part of the ceiling and buying precious seconds for the train to pull away. Secondary explosions followed as the engineers remotely detonated the charges in the tunnel, sealing it permanently against Earth pursuit. Aboard the train, Dax felt the rumble of the explosions through the floor. He clutched Ms. Quick's hand tighter as they accelerated away from Franco Knoll, speeding toward the vast sanctuary beneath Valles Marineris. "What was that?" he asked. The Marine who had boarded with him, her armor scorched and blood seeping from a wound in her side, looked back toward Franco Knoll with hollow eyes. "That was Marine Parson," she said quietly, "making sure we got away." Dax's small face crumpled. "He promised he'd find us." The Marine knelt before the boy, her expression softening. "He gave you something to remember him by, didn't he?" Dax shook his head. "I gave him my Phobos charm, for luck." The Marine smiled sadly. "Then he's still with you in a way, and what he fought for, what all of them fought for back there, was to make sure you and everyone on this train would survive. To keep Mars alive," Dax said, echoing words he'd heard at the rally that now seemed a lifetime ago. "That's right, kid. Mars isn't just dust and rock. It's people." The Marine looked around at the crowded train car. Families huddled together, the wounded being tended, children with tear-streaked faces. "It's all of us. The maglev train hurtled through the darkness, carrying the remnants of Franco Knoll deeper into the red planet's embrace. Behind them, the once great colonial city burned under Earth's assault, its defenders making their final stands in streets and buildings where generations of Martians had lived and dreamed. 3 days later, in the vast underground complex beneath Valles Marineris, Lieutenant Montana stood before a makeshift memorial wall. Thousands of names were being added hourly as reports filtered in from across the planet. So many lost. Perhaps too many. His arm was properly bandaged now, though the doctors said he'd never regain full use of it, a small price compared to what others had paid. A familiar figure appeared beside him. Colonel Darius, her face heavily bandaged, moving with the aid of a cane. Reports of her death had been premature. She'd been pulled from the rubble of the transit station by the last evacuating Marines. "How many made it?" Montana asked quietly. Darius consulted her datapad. "From Franco Knoll? About 250,000. Her voice was raspy from dust inhalation. "Planet-wide, we're looking at just under 2 million so far, with some groups still trickling in through secondary routes." 2 million, Montana repeated. "Out of 3.2 billion? Darius didn't answer. There was nothing to say to make the numbers less horrific. "Earth controls the surface now," she said after a long silence. "Orbital scans show they're setting up permanent bases, bringing in terraforming equipment, remaking Mars in Earth's image." Montana said bitterly. "After they murdered its people. Not all of them." Darius gestured to the vast cavern around them, where refugees from across Mars were being processed, housed, fed. "We're still here, and they don't know about Lazarus." Montana wasn't so sure. "They knew about our bunkers, Colonel. About our evacuation routes. Someone talked. We found him." Darius's voice was cold. "A senior aide to the governor. Earth promised him a cushy position in their new colonial administration." Her smile was grim. "He's been dealt with. Too late for those we lost." "Yes." Darius placed a hand on the memorial wall. "But not too late for those who remain." Montana followed her gaze across the cavern to where children played in a makeshift recreation area. Among them was a small boy with solemn eyes, clutching something in his hand as he watched the other children. "What now, Colonel?" Montana asked. "We can't hide down here forever." "No, we can't." Darius straightened, wincing at the pain from her injuries. "But we can rebuild. We can plan, and when the time is right." Her eyes hardened. "We can remind Earth that Mars is not so easily conquered." Montana nodded slowly. "The other colonies, Venus, the Belt, already sending messages of support. Secretly, of course." Darius' smile turned predatory. "Earth didn't just massacre Martians. They showed every colony in the system what awaits them if they don't bow to Earth's authority." "They've united the colonies against them," Montana realized. "Precisely. The war isn't over, Lieutenant. It's just entered a new phase." As they spoke, Dax approached the memorial wall. In his small hand, he held a crudely carved stone figure. A new Phobos charm he'd made himself. He placed it at the base of the wall, then stepped back and saluted as he'd seen the Marines do. Montana watched the boy with a lump in his throat. "Parson asked me to look out for him," he said quietly. "If I made it, and he didn't?" Darius nodded. "Then that's your mission now, Lieutenant." She looked around at the gathered refugees, the last free Martians. "We all have our missions. Survive, rebuild, remember, and someday return to the surface," Montana added. "Someday," Darius agreed. "For now, we are Mars's past, present, and future, preserved here in the dark while Earth celebrates its hollow victory above." In the shadows of Valles Marineris, humanity's last stand on Mars had ended, but in its place, something new had begun. A promise written in blood and sacrifice. A promise that Mars would rise again. Dax stepped away from the memorial wall. the red dust of the surface still clinging to his shoes. He looked up at the carved ceiling of the massive cavern, imagining the stars beyond the rock and the planet's surface above. "For Mars," he whispered, echoing the words of the fallen. "For Mars." Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to the story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.